She called me at 2 p.m., my sister. She didn't say hello. Her first words were, "I need you to pick up my son. My nanny quit." I told her I was in the middle of a job interview that could change my life, and she said, "So, reschedule. You're my backup plan." This is the story of how I stopped being her doormat and became the wrecking ball that shattered her perfect life. The voicemail played in my car, the sound of my own desperation echoing back at me. "We're sorry, but the position has been filled by another candidate whose experience better aligns with our current needs." I let my head fall against the steering wheel, the sting of rejection hot in my eyes. Another one. 3 years of freelance graphic design work had left my savings bled dry, and this job, a stable, salaried in-house designer role, had been my lifeline. Now it was gone. That's when my phone rang. My sister, Jessica, a flicker of hope. Maybe she'd sensed my despair. Maybe, for once, she was calling to check on me. I answered, my voice thick with unshed tears. "Jess." No greeting, just the crisp, impatient tone of a CEO addressing a subordinate. "Chloe, listen. The nanny just walked out. I have a client presentation in an hour that will make or break the quarter. You need to get to Oliver's school. Now, pick him up, take him to soccer practice, and stay with him until I get home." The whiplash from my own crushing failure to her demand was dizzying. "Jessica, I can't. I just got out of my interview and—" "Chloe, this is not a debate." She cut me off, her voice sharp enough to slice through steel. "This is a $5 million account. My career is on the line. Whatever you're dealing with can wait. This is an emergency." Whatever you're dealing with. My job search, my financial freefall, my crumbling self-esteem. It was all just background noise to the grand, important symphony of her life. For my entire 30 years, I had lived in the shadow of Jessica's dazzling success. She was a vice president at a sleek marketing firm, a queen in a glass-walled corner office. I was the creative, the free spirit, terms my family used to gently mask their pity for my unstable career. I was reliable Chloe, the one you called when your nanny quit, your dog needed walking, or your plumbing exploded. I was the backup plan, the flexible one with no real responsibilities. And for just as long, I had always said yes. But sitting in that car, the ghost of my failed interview clinging to me, something finally, irrevocably, broke. "No," I said. The silence on the other end was absolute. I could almost hear the gears in her perfectly organized brain grinding to a halt. "What did you say?" "I said no, Jessica. I can't do it. You'll have to figure it out yourself." "Chloe, do not be selfish. Oliver is your nephew, my presentation." "Is more important than my life?" I snapped, a lifetime of resentment boiling over. "My career, my future. You're not asking for a favor, you're issuing a command, and I'm done taking orders." I ended the call, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had just declared war. The fallout was immediate and vicious. My phone blew up with texts. "Unbelievable. You've just screwed me. Mom is going to hear about this." An hour later, my mother called, her voice laced with disappointed concern. "Chloe, honey, your sister is under so much pressure. Was it so hard to help her out just this once? You know she'd do the same for you." Except she never had. When my car died last winter, she'd been too busy to loan me money for repairs. When I was sick with the flu, she'd never once offered to bring me soup. I was the helper. She was the one who needed help. That night, shivering in my cold apartment because I couldn't afford to turn up the heat, I made a decision. If I was just a backup plan, then I would become the most unreliable, treacherous backup plan in history. I would no longer be the rock they built their lives upon. I would become the earthquake. The opportunity for my revenge fell into my lap a week later, courtesy of my sweet, oblivious nephew, Oliver. I was video calling him, a ritual his mother never participated in, when he mentioned Jessica's super-secret work project. "It's a big party in a fancy garden," he chirped, munching on a cookie. "Mommy says it's for her promotion. She's been fighting with a lady named Stacy about it." A garden party, a promotion. My ears perked up. I did some digging through Oliver's chatter and a few of Jessica's public social media posts. It was the firm's annual partner track gala, her ultimate career showcase. And the main attraction was a custom, interactive event app that guests would use, a digital map, a schedule, and a high-tech scavenger hunt. The lead developer, Stacy, had just quit. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. An event app, UI/UX design, interactive elements. This wasn't just in my skill set, it was my specialty. The very skills Jessica had always dismissed as my little computer hobbies. I drafted an email, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a purpose they hadn't felt in years. Subject: formal proposal, interactive app for Sterling Media Gala. Jessica, it has come to my attention that you require immediate development of a custom application for your upcoming corporate gala. As a professional UI/UX designer and developer, I am available for freelance contract work. My portfolio is attached. For a rush project of this scale, requiring a flawless, brand-integrated product, my fee is $7,500. Payment is due in full upon delivery of the final, functional application 48 hours before the event. The source code will be transferred upon receipt of cleared funds. I require your decision within the hour. Sincerely, Chloe Miller. I hit send. The gauntlet had been thrown. Her response was a phone call, her voice a low, furious hiss. $7,500. Are you insane? We're family. No, Jessica, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. You're a client, and clients who have a history of refusing to pay for my professional services now pay a premium. That is my rate. You're trying to blackmail me. I'm offering you a solution to your problem. At market value, do you want it or not? I heard her swallow her rage. She was trapped. It was too late to find someone else. Her entire promotion hinged on this event being perfect. Fine, she spat, but it better be the best damn app anyone has ever seen. Oh, it will be, I promised, a shiver of anticipation running down my spine. It will be absolutely unforgettable. I was no longer the backup plan. I was the architect of her downfall, and I had just been handed the blueprints. The transfer of $3,750, half my fee, as I'd sternly insisted, hit my bank account an hour later. Seeing the number in my once dismal balance felt like drawing a first breath after years of suffocation. It wasn't just money. It was a tangible token of my newfound power. For the first time, Jessica had been forced to acknowledge my work had value. She had paid for it. I threw myself into the project with a ferocious focus I hadn't known I possessed. This wasn't just a job, it was my masterpiece, my Trojan horse. I studied the event plans she reluctantly forwarded, the layout of the botanical gardens, the schedule of speeches, the list of senior partners who held her future in their hands. I built the app to her exact, demanding specifications. It was sleek, intuitive, and beautiful. The digital map was a work of art, the schedules synced flawlessly with their calendars, and the scavenger hunt, her proudest, most innovative idea, was engaging and clever. But as I coded, I built in something else. A backdoor. A tiny, invisible flaw in the logic, a single line of code that acted as a silent, sleeping bomb. It was tied to a specific, hidden trigger. A part of me, the old Chloe, whispered that this was going too far. But that voice was drowned out by the memory of her disdain, the countless times she had treated my emergencies as inconveniences and her inconveniences as my emergencies. The night before the gala, I delivered the final product. It was, by all accounts, perfect. Jessica tested it with a grudging nod. "It works," was all she said, before authorizing the final payment. The remaining $3,750 landed in my account. I was $7,500 richer, and she was none the wiser that she had just paid for her own professional execution. The day of the gala dawned bright and clear. I knew because Jessica sent a smug group family text with a picture of the cloudless sky, captioned, "Perfect day for a perfect event. Big things ahead, partner track garden gala." I didn't reply. I dressed in my own best outfit, a simple but elegant black dress I'd bought with my new earnings, and prepared my own staging area. I wasn't going to the gala. I was going to a quiet cafe with excellent Wi-Fi, my laptop, and a front row seat to the digital demolition. From the photos that began popping up on social media, the event was a stunning success. The gardens were immaculate, the guests were glittering, and Jessica was the picture of confident ambition, working the room in a sharp, white power suit. I saw a photo of her laughing with Mr. Sterling, the firm's founding partner. She was so close to her goal she could taste it. Then, at 4:17 p.m., right in the middle of the keynote address from a major client, I initiated the trigger. It started subtly. A guest trying to check the schedule for the next speaker found the app had frozen. Another, trying to use the interactive map to find the restrooms, found the screen had gone blank. Then, the real show began. One by one, every phone that had the app installed began to emit a soft but distinct chime. The screen would light up, and a new notification would appear, bold and impossible to ignore. It wasn't a glitch. It was a broadcast. Scavenger hunt clue 7. Find the VP who takes credit for her team's work. Hint, she's wearing white. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. I could imagine the awkward glances, the suppressed snickers. Jessica, from her spot near the podium, would have been confused, her smile tightening. Another chime, a minute later. Scavenger hunt clue 8. Locate the executive who called the Henderson account a sinking ship in an email. Her initials are JM. I saw it then in a live stream one of the guests was doing in the background. Jessica's face drained of all color. Her head whipped around, her eyes wide with panic. Mr. Sterling, standing nearby, was no longer smiling. He was frowning at his phone. The app was no longer a tool. It was a truth-telling phantom, whispering her secrets into the ears of everyone who mattered. I had spent weeks not just coding her app, but meticulously combing through the old emails she'd thoughtlessly forwarded me over the years, complaining about clients, mocking colleagues, venting her arrogance and insecurities. I had her digital diary, and I was now reading it aloud to her most important audience. Scavenger hunt clue 9. Discover who nearly lost the Finley deal by missing the deadline and blamed it on a family emergency. That one was for me. The memory of that canceled job interview, the one that had started it all, flashed before my eyes. This was my invoice. This was my late fee. Chaos erupted. The elegant garden party transformed into a hive of frantic whispers and pointed fingers. I saw Jessica desperately trying to get people to close the app, her composure shattered, her hands trembling. But it was too late. The seeds of doubt of scandal were sown. The senior partners were huddled together, their faces like stone. Mr. Sterling had put his phone in his pocket and was watching Jessica with a cold, disappointed expression that spelled the end of everything she had worked for. The live stream cut off. My phone began to ring. It was Jessica. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, and again, then my mother, then my father. I silenced it. The cafe around me was peaceful. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It tasted like victory. An hour later, the final, definitive blow landed. An email popped into my inbox from a generic HR address at Sterling Media. Dear Ms. Miller, it has come to our attention that you were the developer of the application used at today's corporate event. We are conducting an internal investigation into the data breach and the source of the unauthorized communications. We would appreciate your discretion and your cooperation. Please confirm you have received this email. I closed my laptop. The show was over. The backup plan had not only failed, it had actively turned on its master. I went home, a strange emptiness settling over me. The high of the revenge was fading, leaving behind the cold, hard reality of what I had done. I had not just embarrassed my sister, I had likely vaporized her career. I had burned a bridge so thoroughly that the very river it spanned had likely boiled away. The fallout was nuclear. My phone exploded. Voicemails from my mother sobbing, "What did you do? What is wrong with you?" Texts from my father, "Call us immediately. Jessica has been suspended." Articles began popping up on industry blogs. Sterling Media Gala descends into chaos following app sabotage. They didn't name names, but the industry knew. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived. It was from Sterling Media's legal counsel. They were not pressing charges. Given the familial context and Jessica's own lapses in judgment, revealed by the app, but they were terminating her employment effective immediately for gross misconduct and creating a hostile work environment. They were also sending me a cease and desist order, barring me from ever discussing the event or the code. I held the letter, the paper crisp and official in my hands. I had won. I had taken her dream job. I had exacted a price for every slight, every dismissal, every time she had treated me as less than. So why did I feel so hollow? The answer came a week later, in a small, plain envelope hand-delivered to my door. There was no return address. Inside was a single, lined sheet of paper, covered in a child's clumsy, heartfelt handwriting. Dear Aunt Chloe, Mommy cries all the time now. She doesn't get dressed. She yelled at me for spilling juice. I heard her tell Grandma that you are a monster. Are you a monster? I don't think you are. I miss our video calls. I love you. Love, Oliver. The paper fell from my hands. I slid down the wall onto my floor, the sobs finally coming, racking and painful. In my quest for justice, in my war against my sister, I had forgotten the one truly innocent casualty. I had become so focused on proving I wasn't a doormat that I hadn't noticed I was becoming the monster under my nephew's bed. The revenge was complete. It was perfect, poetic, and devastating. And as I sat there on the cold floor, I realized the person I had destroyed wasn't just Jessica. It was the person I used to be. The kind, reliable Aunt Chloe was gone, and I had no idea who was left in her place. The silence in my apartment was a physical presence, thick and suffocating. Oliver's letter lay on the floor where I had dropped it, each carefully printed word a shard of glass in my conscience. Are you a monster? The question echoed in the hollow spaces my revenge had carved out inside me. For 2 weeks I had bathed in the righteous heat of my anger, but now that fire had burned out, leaving only cold, gray ash. I had won. I had shattered Jessica's career, her reputation, her carefully constructed identity. So why did my victory feel like a terminal diagnosis? The phone calls from my parents had stopped. The texts had ceased. I had been excommunicated. The silence was more punishing than their anger. I was utterly, profoundly alone. The $7,500 in my bank account felt like blood money. I couldn't bring myself to spend a cent of it. I tried to lose myself in work, but my creativity had deserted me. The screen remained blank, a mocking reflection of my own emptiness. I was a ghost in my own life. The high of the sabotage had been a drug, and now I was crashing hard. I saw Jessica's face, pale and shattered, every time I closed my eyes. I heard Oliver's voice asking if I was a monster. After 3 days of this self-imposed solitary confinement, a different kind of call came. It was from a headhunter, a woman named Sarah with a crisp, professional voice. Chloe Miller, I was given your name by a confidential source at Sterling Media. They said your work on the Gala app before the incident was some of the most innovative UI design they'd seen in years. Despite the circumstances, your talent is undeniable. I have a client, a rising tech startup, looking for a lead designer. They're aware of the story and they're still interested. Are you available to talk? I was speechless. This was the last thing I expected. My act of revenge, my nuclear option, had somehow perversely become my portfolio. The very notoriety I had earned was opening doors. The irony was so bitter it made me nauseous. I managed to mumble a yes, thank you, and schedule an interview. The following Monday, I put on my interview suit, the same one from my failed interview weeks before, and walked into the bright, open-plan offices of Aura, a company specializing in mental wellness apps. The CEO, a woman named Anya, was direct and unflinching. We know what happened at Sterling Media, she said, her gaze steady. Frankly, we see it as a massive failure on their part to recognize and respect talent. They treated you like a commodity, and you reacted. We're not here to judge your methods. We're here because we need a designer who understands user emotion, even the dark ones, someone with a spine. The story is that you built a flawless app and then used it to deliver a message. We want that level of skill, directed at helping people, not hurting them. I got the job. The salary was more than double what I would have made at the other company. It was a victory, a redemption arc handed to me on a silver platter, but it felt like a lie. They were hearing the monster, the avenging angel, not me. My first task was to design the interface for a new feature helping people process grief and anger. The hypocrisy was a stone in my gut. How could I, who had channeled my own grief and anger into such a destructive act, design a tool to help others manage theirs? I was a fraud. The breaking point came on a Friday night. I was walking home from work, past a small, serene park. I saw a woman on a bench, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Something about the curve of her back, the utter defeat in her posture, reminded me of Jessica. Of the photo I'd seen online of her leaving the Sterling Media building for the last time, her face hidden behind sunglasses. I didn't go home. I got in my car and I drove. I didn't have a destination, but my hands on the wheel seemed to know the way. 40 minutes later, I was idling outside Jessica's imposing modern house, the one I had never been invited to except to babysit. The lawn was perfectly manicured, the windows dark. It looked like a tomb. I don't know how long I sat there. Finally, the front door opened and Oliver came out, scuffing his shoes on the steps. He looked smaller, sadder. He saw my car. He stared for a moment, then turned and ran inside. My heart sank, but a moment later the door opened again. It was Jessica. She looked hollowed out. The power suit was gone, replaced by faded yoga pants and an old sweatshirt. Her face was free of makeup, pale and drawn. The fire of ambition that had always burned in her eyes was extinguished. She looked like the ghost of my sister. We stood 20 feet apart, separated by her perfect lawn, the chasm between us wider than any ocean. "What do you want, Chloe?" Her voice was flat, drained of all emotion. There was no anger left. That was the most terrifying thing of all. I don't know," I whispered, my own voice breaking. "I saw Oliver wrote me a letter." She flinched as if I'd struck her. "He misses you. He doesn't understand why his aunt, who he loves, tried to destroy his mother." The words "tried to" hung in the air. She hadn't said destroyed. She had said tried to. "Did I asked, the question I had been too afraid to ask myself. "Did I destroy you?" She looked away towards the house where our nephew was. "You destroyed the person I was," she said quietly. "The VP, the rising star, the woman who thought she was the most important person in every room." She finally looked back at me, and for the first time I saw something raw and unguarded in her eyes. That woman needed destroying. She was awful to you, to a lot of people. I was stunned into silence. This wasn't the script. She was supposed to scream, to curse me, to tell me I was a monster. This quiet acceptance was disarming. "I got a job," I blurted out as if offering a peace offering. "At Aura." "I know," she said. "Anya is an old colleague. She called me for a reference." My knees felt weak. You gave me a reference." I told her you were the most brilliantly ruthless designer I'd ever met, and that if she could channel that talent toward something constructive, she'd be a fool not to hire you. A ghost of a smile, bitter and sad, touched her lips. "Consider it my final act as your superior." The wind rustled the leaves of the expensive ornamental tree in her front yard. The silence stretched, but it was different now. It was no longer a wall. It was a bridge we were both afraid to cross. "I'm sorry," I said. The words were inadequate, a thimble of water on a forest fire, but they were all I had. "I know," she replied. "I am too." She took a deep breath. The nanny quitting that day, it wasn't just the nanny. My husband had told me he was leaving me the night before. He'd been having an affair for a year. The merger was my last-ditch effort to prove I was enough, that my success could fill the hole he was leaving. When I called you, I wasn't just being a bitch. I was drowning. And you were the only one I knew who would always answer. The confession landed like a punch. I had been so wrapped up in my own narrative of injustice, I had never stopped to consider that her emergency might have been a real one. A human one. I had seen her as a villain, not as a flawed, desperate person who was also in pain. "I didn't know," I whispered, tears finally streaming down my face. "You never asked," she said, her own eyes glistening. "You were always so busy being the long-suffering saint, you never stopped to see that I was falling apart. We were a terrible team, Chloe. You, the silent martyr, me, the entitled tyrant." We stood there, two broken women in the twilight, seeing each other clearly for the first time in our adult lives. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm in therapy. It turns out being publicly humiliated and losing your job is a great catalyst for self-reflection. I'm learning how to be a better mother to Oliver. Maybe one day I can learn how to be a sister again." The door opened again and Oliver peeked out, his eyes wide. He looked from his mother to me. "Aunt Chloe," he said, his voice small and hopeful. It was that hope, so fragile and resilient in his small voice, that finally broke me. I nodded, unable to speak. Jessica looked at me, a real, tentative warmth in her eyes for the first time. "He's having a birthday next week. It would mean a lot to him if you came." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a happy ending. The ruins of our relationship were still smoldering around us, but it was a start, a tiny green shoot pushing through the ash. I drove home that night, the hollow feeling inside me beginning to fill with something new, something painful but real. Grief for the years we had wasted, shame for the damage I had caused, and a fragile, terrifying sliver of hope. The revenge was over. The much harder work of rebuilding had just begun. I had set out to prove I was more than just a backup plan. I had learned, in the most brutal way possible, that the most powerful plot twist isn't destruction. It's the choice, after everything has been burned to the ground, to pick up a single stone and start again.